Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to another episode of the ARC Podcast. We've got a topic today that was inspired by a recent interaction I had with a group of people. And in that email interaction, I sent a whole bunch of information, and I received a variety of responses. Some responses were very nice and gracious and thankful. Others were just like pure, here's the answer, nothing around it. And then, of course, there were some non-responses. But in that, it really highlighted this point that in our general communication, there are a lot of opportunities for us to show appreciation, show acknowledgement, and kind of under the umbrella of have good manners when it comes to interacting to individuals. So we thought we would talk a little bit about, maybe what that looks like, maybe some of the what not to do's and the to do's that, in a world where everybody is so busy and tends to be rushing from one thing to another, taking a moment to, show your appreciation can really make you stand out in a crowd. Liz, Donnie, any moments where maybe a good appreciation or lack thereof may have stood out in your interactions from day to day?
Well,
Yep.
I'll jump in with
Yeah, go ahead.
both a personal and then a professional one. So on the personal one, I always thought it was interesting that you bring this up because one of my aunts used to would give us a birthday card with money. And she actually did this all the way until I think I was almost 40, maybe 30, 35. It was pretty late. And it was funny because afterwards we told she actually apologized once, and I said, "Oh my gosh, Auntie, we never." When she stopped, she apologized, and we were like, "Oh my God, we never expected it." So I feel we were always very appreciative that she did it. And then she said, "Well, you know why I kept doing it for you guys is because you guys always said thank you." Because even
Aw.
after, I mean, she would literally mail the card to us. Um, so then I would always either text her or email her and say, got the card, thank you very much, all that stuff. So it was very interesting to see that and continue to incentivize her behavior to continue giving, well past our kid time. And apparently it was just our family. It was me and my brothers that would receive this, not our cousins, because we all were trained to tell her thank you. So that was an interesting one, the
That's
power of the
awesome.
thank you. In the work situation, this brings up again, and I already revealed, right? I'm way older than 40 because we're past that. But this makes me think of the advice that we used to get, which was after an interview, handwrite a card saying thank
Yep.
you and send that to your interviewer. Now I get the emails, which is definitely okay to me rather than the card. But that kind of brought up that thought of, hey, you should help stand out. And this advice goes way back on by actually showing appreciation to an interviewer.
That's great.
Yeah, I would say I probably get 50% of the people I interview send thank yous or follow-ups at all. Um, and that doesn't feel great, right? But I
Yeah.
also think that, I tend to send thank yous as well for people's time on the flip side, right? even if they're interviewing for something at a low level, I don't really care. I still, thank them for their time and tell them it was nice to meet them and then tell them next steps, right? Like, this is what you should expect. Here's the communication that will follow, right? But I don't open it with here's next steps, blah, blah, blah. Okay, bye. I open it with it was wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to apply and interview. And, it was nice learning about this about you, right? And I think that manners in general goes both ways, right? It shouldn't just be coming from like a lower level, it should be coming from leadership as well. And if you display those manners in a professional setting when you're in a leadership role, it is fair to expect them back. If you don't display those manners, it is fair to expect you will not get that behavior reciprocated, right? And I think, in some cases, that's cultural, right? And it depends on where you are in the world. It depends on where you are even in this country. And it also depends on the culture of the organization, right? And you might have a culture at an organization that is not very polite, that is fairly rude, that don't exhibit good manners on a regular basis. And that could align with your personal behavior, or it could be completely misaligned with how you were raised and your personal feelings towards the subject. And of course, that's not necessarily the best fit of a culture for you as an individual. But moving on to the point of it is understanding where you're sitting and how you should behave. And the rules of operation are different depending on the situation, right? And so I have a good one. I work with clients all over the world and I adjust my tone. I adjust the way I communicate with people based on the manners of their culture and based on them as individuals, right? So I grew up in New York. I tend to be very blunt, direct. That does not mean I have bad manners, right? That means I know when people need direct communication and when they don't, and I adjust it accordingly, right? And when I'm writing an email to a New York startup that generally speaking doesn't really want to talk to me, they just want the information that they requested, my pleasantries go at the end of my email. So my first is I answer their questions in bullet point form. I highlight the things they need to know. I tell them where to find the attachments or log into the portal or whatever it is that I'm sending information. And then at the end, I say, I hope you had a wonderful holiday. I think the weather's really wonderful in New York. Are you traveling anywhere? Because I know you love to travel. Whatever it is, my manners go at the end. If I'm writing that same email to a client in California, my manners go at the front. And I say, hey, I hope the kids are doing really well. I know you had a soccer tournament you were traveling to last week. How'd that go? Like, love to hear about it. Whatever else my pleasantries are. And then I put my bullet point list at the bottom of the email and sign off, right? Because I'm culturally sensitive to East Coast, West Coast mentalities and what people need and how they want the information presented. But it doesn't mean I leave out the pleasantries or I ignore manners altogether.
Yeah, those are such great examples, both of you. And I something that I thought of as you were describing that at the beginning, Liz, as far as like culturally, and I think about leadership and the amount of times I've gone into a business meeting where I see a leader, even starting the meeting by, maybe thanking the people who organized the meeting or, thanking everybody for taking time out to be there. Like, it sets such a different tone for that meeting, in my opinion, when I hear that, just to like kick off and see people in, authoritative positions still showing their appreciation. Those are the rooms that I enjoy being in. And, the point that you are taking as far as being sensitive to East Coast and West Coast, and I don't want people to maybe like get concerned that they're going to do it wrong based on who they're, right? Like, I think this is one of those things where, as long as you're doing it and showing it, that appreciation, even if you get a little bit out of order, that's okay. I'd rather side on doing it incorrectly than not doing it at all.
Oh, absolutely. I once worked for a firm that had a partner that would walk around at about 8 o'clock at night in busy season, and he had a clipboard and he would write down anyone that was in the office and what they were doing, which is awful. Like from a cultural perspective, awful. Nobody liked this guy. Nobody wanted to work with him. He was very difficult to work with otherwise. And also, he took these notes so that when he went into roundtables about people's performance, he could be like, well, this person was consistent and here's the data to prove it, right? Or this person was never there at 8 p.m. Well, it didn't like in my head, it doesn't matter if you're sitting at your desk in an office because you could be working at home. And at that point, it was totally feasible and possible. But didn't matter to him. What mattered was your attendance there. And he would walk by every night and he'd stop at your cubicle or your office and just look at you, look at your computer screen, look at what was on your desk and take notes. And rarely did he say anything. Occasionally he would say like, hey, hi, hope you're okay, right? He never asked if you were okay. He never like displayed any manners whatsoever. And so every night I made it a point as he walked by my cube, and I was always there because I'm not very good at focusing in other environments. So for me, at that point in my career, I needed to be at my desk. And every night when he would walk by, I would be like, "Hey, how are you? How's the day going? How are your clients? How's busy season?" And I just pepper him with questions. Very pleasant, very kind, very sweet questions. And he would answer me most of the time. And he like would make weird faces at me, like, "Why are you talking to me?" And then occasionally he'd be like, "You need to focus," like, and just like grumble and walk off. But over the like 3 or 4 years that I worked at that firm, he started to actually like me. Even this person with this thick
Yep.
exterior with like absolutely no soul and, this clipboard of notes on everyone, I'd be like, "How's your wife?" And he'd be like, "Oh, she's actually doing really well. Like, here's a cool thing she did." And he started answering these questions more in depth every single time. And we built a relationship off of me being obnoxious. I started these questions because I was like, this guy has no manners and no social like acuity at all. I'm going to just be the one that's social and kind. And by the end of the time I worked there, like I'd go sit in his office and talk to him for half an hour randomly. And I learned all sorts of stuff about him, about his clients, about the stuff he enjoyed, about his weekends, his kids, his wife, like all these things. And everybody else in the firm had no idea who this guy was. All they knew is he was the guy with the clipboard who had like really difficult clients and all this other BS around it. And so manners can actually build rapport. Even when they're not originally reciprocated, people will start to understand that, oh, this is a social thing, right? I should do this, right?
When you said kind, it brought the kill him with kindness, but maybe this is a win him over with kindness situation instead.
And, I think that it is fair to expect leadership to come in with, kindness, with
Yeah.
manners, with respect. And in a lot of ways in our society, we show respect through manners. It is not always going to be the case. And sometimes you at a lower level are going to have to be the person to initiate that. And if you're in a culture that doesn't have it, you might be the one that changes that just by sticking to your integrity and what you think is appropriate in that situation.
Yeah, I love that story and it resonates so much, with how I approach a lot of situations too. Showing interest in people can really go a long way. There was a time many years ago when I had my IT company when I was visiting a firm to help them. They were having IT issues. I was meeting with their director of IT and the managing partner. And it was a multi-day trip, so we went out to dinner one evening and we sat there for dinner. And I just peppered the managing partner with so many questions. Tell me about your family. Like through the course of the conversation, we learned that he was adopted and he had this like just amazing story growing up and all these things. So then the next day, I come into the office and I sit down with the IT director, and he says, "I've worked with that dude for 10 years and didn't know anything about him until we had dinner with him last night." And I'm like, why aren't you taking interest in the people that you work with? Even if you work for them, you can still take interest in their lives and who they are and learn so much and create a relationship that is beyond the clipboard and the notes. It's so easy to me. It's so natural, and I don't know why more people don't do it.
You bring up the business dining or business meal, and that's actually one where I notice people's manners too. That's one of the reasons I actually like to do business
Yeah.
meals, because it's interesting to me when you're whether you're at like an event and you're like on the big 10-person table, or even if you're on just like a 4-person, like kind of like you were saying, like maybe where it's just 4 of us sitting at a table or something. It's interesting to see people interact with the wait staff or the bussers and things. And do they say please? Do they say thank you when the water's refilled? How do they treat them? That's one of the things that I look at whenever I'm out, whether it's with a client or someone I'm interviewing. Like, how do they actually interact with the staff? And so to me, that tells me a lot of how they're going to end up interacting with everyone else and with our clients.
I actually listened to a podcast recently. I don't know how true this is, but there was a story about a startup CEO who had a habit of taking new hires to a restaurant. And it's a restaurant that he frequented, so he knew the restaurant really well. And he would have the restaurant intentionally mess up the interviewee's order so that he could gauge how they responded to it. And he said it was just enlightening because, to your point, it would either be somebody would get, very irritated and be very rude to the staff, or, maybe somebody would not say anything at all, which is also kind of an interesting observation, or other people who might just do a really good job of handling the situation. So I agree with you that that setting kind of creates a really good environment to gauge how people act.
I wonder what the like worst response was, right? I mean, I'm assuming it's like the angry response would be the worst one, right? But maybe not. Maybe it's somebody who like doesn't say anything but just complains really loudly about it and doesn't actually directly address it at all, you
Super
know?
passive aggressive.
Yeah, right. Like there's so many ways that could go wrong, and also so many ways that could go right just by direct, honest communication and respectful communication with manners, right?
Yeah.
That's the other side that ugh, people are so awful to restaurant staff.
Yeah, I do. I think there is a really awful culture of people just really kind of going into restaurants from kind of an entitled perspective, kind of like you are here to wait on me, so I'm
Hmm.
just going to treat you as if that's it. And then even the lack of understanding between, who's responsible for your meal, between, the wait staff potentially putting in an order improperly, or the kitchen messing up the order, and all of these things. It just creates a really interesting dynamic, I think, where you can learn a
Hmm.
lot about people and their understanding of kind of the world around them.
The world works. Yep.
I think that
Yeah.
works well in an American setting. I'm not sure that would work really well in an international setting. And I say that because there are a
Oh,
lot of
interesting.
cultures that have um, expectations around servers or around the servant class specifically. And in other parts of the world, if you are too respectful, it makes them uncomfortable. You have to be direct and also let them do their job. And if you don't let them do their job or you tell them how to do their job, they get very offended, right? And so, I think being culturally sensitive to who you're with, where they grew up, what that part of the world looks like, and understanding that there are different expectations in different places. So here's a good US example, right? People say that people in New York City are rude. Well, in my opinion, yeah, there are some rude people. There are rude people everywhere. You're just going to encounter more of them because you're in New York and there's, millions of people concentrated. And also, most of the time, New Yorkers are not being rude. They are telling you to be self-aware. And if you are not self-aware, you are the one that is being rude. Because you are in a very populous place, you need to understand where you are, your physical boundaries, also how to interact in that situation. Like, great example. You go to a bagel store, you're waiting for your bagel to come out. You don't stand in the middle of everything with bags and coffees and things in the way. You hide in a corner and you make yourself as small as you can waiting, and then you get your stuff. And if you stand in the middle, in the entryway, these shops are tiny. If you stand in front of the counter when people are trying to interact and do things, someone's going to say, move. And that is not them being rude. That is them telling you, you are not being self-aware in this moment, and you physically need to move because you are in the way, right? Now they can say it nicer than like get the F out of the way, but that's also in that regard, you're the one that has encroached and made the mistake first, and they are responding to it. And that's where people don't recognize and say New Yorkers are just rude. And it's no, you're just not self-aware. You don't understand the culture there, and you are violating that without manners because that is very disrespectful in that environment, right? And so I bring that up to say, like, there's different ways that people interact with the world. There's different cultures and there's different societal expectations depending on where you are. It is your job to figure out where you are and what the expectations are in that situation and use your manners appropriately,
I would
you
bridge
know.
that too. Even you earlier, you mentioned the culture in the firm or in a company, and I think that's important, especially as leaders, that we set that. Because, like in our firm, saying thank you, showing appreciation is an important thing. I try to do it whenever my team is doing things that I think is either good, whether it's for me or for a client, or, it's like, thank you for doing that, or thank you for taking care of that client type of thing. We actually also surface it with software. So we try to several different softwares at this point, but it allowed them to say thank you to someone else, and it was very interesting when we ran this. I ran the experiment. My team didn't know I was running an experiment on them, but we had one software that had dollars attached to it, and so whenever you gave someone a thank you, you could give them $1 with it as well. On the other hand, we had another one that didn't have it. It was just kind of you could express thanks. We also had it where it was part of a weekly check-in. It actually prompted them, who did you appreciate this week, or who would you like to thank this week? And it lets you kind of mention them so that you see it. Well, the interesting thing was to see which teams used or didn't use the dollar-based one, because there was actually money tied to it. So that was kind of interesting to see there. But the other thing for me as a leader that I found really useful was I could see all the thanks that people were showing to each other, which actually helped me be more aware of, oh, so and so stepped out of their way to do this for a client, or so and so did that, or
Mhm.
so and so helped. Or a lot of people perceive this little small thing, but a lot of people showed thanks for it. So that was kind of interesting to actually see the appreciation flowing within the company.
That's really great. Yeah, I love those tools, and I think there's a lot of ways that organizations can do that, either through a dedicated tool or even a Slack channel or a Teams channel that is for showing appreciation. And then, to your point, leadership, like seeing that and even like acknowledging those moments or maybe picking out opportunities to share at a higher level. There's just so many things from a culture perspective you can do to really encourage and incentivize those types of behaviors.
Absolutely. And then I think, we get into there are different manners on different platforms and different communication expectations around newer technologies, right? Like there's a different way you communicate in social media than you would on email, than you would on text, than you would at work, than you would with your family. And so you end up with all these like subclasses of this is how to interact in this situation, this is how to interact in this situation. And it is okay if you don't know, right? Like if you don't know what the appropriate way to interact on a platform is, because it's either a new platform, we're developing them all the time, or it's a new situation, or maybe like you've just never really thought about it, right? Like, I mean, I know plenty of people who have made it very far in their career that have very poor online manners and don't know it, right?
Yep.
Like one of the guys on my team who's a little older than me, like ends every sentence with dot dot dot. And I keep telling him, like, when you do that, people have generalized anxiety because they're expecting something to come next, right? And he like can't for whatever reason conceptualize why people would not like that response because to him it's just like, well, this is the information and there's more, but I'm not going to share it right now because it's not relevant. And it's just a different mentality, right? Or people that write in shouty caps all the time. Like maybe they're just interacting in a tax program and then coming back and they have no idea that their cap locks is on. And then when they realize it, they're like, well, whatever, send anyways. And then you're like, why are you yelling at me? Like, I don't deserve that, right? That comes off as really rude. And these are, ancient examples by way of
Sure.
where we're at today. But from a manners perspective, it's always okay to push back and be like, hey, I feel like when you use shouty caps, you're yelling at me. Or when you end every sentence in ellipses, that you have more information that you're withholding from me for whatever reason, and it's uncomfortable, right? It is okay to ask. It's okay to say, maybe you've never been on Microsoft Teams and all of a sudden there's Teams and you're like, okay, well, here's these channels, here's what they're used for. Do I have to address this like a formal letter? Do I treat this like a text message where shorthand is okay? Or do I treat this like email where I have to have a sign off and, some formatting? Like, what is the formatting for Teams? And I think that actually is currently different at all organizations, at least the ones I've interacted with. So, for me, I treat it as kind of you use full sentences, you use real grammar, you don't shouty caps at people, you don't shorthand or ellipses things, and also you don't need pleasantries, right? Like maybe it's okay to say good morning. Like here's my thing if you haven't interacted with people before. But if you're posting in a channel specific to a topic and you have a question, like let's say it's a tech issues channel and your computer's having an issue and you have a question, you can say, "Hey, at everyone, has anyone experienced this issue? Here's a screenshot, here's the explanation, question mark," right? Without any preamble or postamble or formal signage, right? What do you
Yeah,
guys think?
I mean, I think you nailed it. In fact, I feel like there could be an entire course on digital communication etiquette and all the things in email. This is the standard in, Slack or Teams. This is the standard. And, one of the things you didn't touch on, I was waiting for it, is emojis. I mean,
Mm.
I will say,
Emojis too.
yeah, like I side on the side of probably excessive emojis, and I tend to use them, you know, uh, to
Like
try
a
to
13-year-old
convey.
girl,
I absolutely. I mean, sometimes entire sentences of emojis. That's it.
only
Um,
communicate in GIF.
that's exactly. It's like hieroglyphics. That's all we do at this point. But I think it's one of the few ways that you can potentially convey some degree of emotion in your writing. And it's really easy, like you said, like in a tech support channel, it's easy to say, like, my computer is broken and I don't know what's happening. And that can be heard in so many different ways. But if you throw like a little like grinny emoji at the end of it, like you'll realize a person's frustrated, but they're not like pissed off at the world and screaming. Like there are things you can do to, um, you know, in that umbrella of communication etiquette to help make sure the receiver is kind of receiving it in the tone that you intended to be delivered at.
Yeah, I mean, you can easily use emojis to mitigate the risk of misconception, right? Which I think is prevalent because people will always interpret through their own filter
That's right,
without the context of body language or tone of voice or anything else, right?
without a doubt. Um, so I think, I mean, this is a big topic, and we've really touched on a lot of elements of it. I would say the key takeaways from my perspective is self-awareness of who and where you are when you are communicating. Um, don't get too caught in the minutia of it. Like showing appreciation will never be a bad thing. And just kind of be aware of the way in which you are communicating with people to make sure that your intentions are clear with the messaging that you're delivering.
Yeah, and I think to like pull it full circle into why you had this rant, right? You're sending this email to college kids, you're doing them a big favor, and half of them don't acknowledge or respond with like no words, just the one asset you requested, right? Um, that is perceived as if there's no appreciation and they are
That's right.
entitled to your work that you put in, right? And so in any situation, personal or professional, if somebody is sending an email very clearly communicating that they are doing a thing that is going to benefit you, you are not entitled to that. That is not an entitlement. That's not a standard thing. That is a show some kind of appreciation, even if it's a, hey, send my assets and say, thank you so much. Really appreciate this. This is great. I can't wait to see the product. One line. It's very easy, like 5 words. That's all you have to do to acknowledge it. And even if you don't have whatever they're requesting in response, but you know they're working on a big project, acknowledge that and say like, hey, this is really cool, you know, or whatever word for cool exists today. I don't know.
Dope.
Super dope. That's older than cool.
It feels like it's the new term though. Rad. It's rad.
Let's go back to rad. Razor. It's razor. It's legit. It's legit, Mr. Patrick.
It's pretty hype.
Yeah. But anyways, the point being, just don't not respond, even, you know, if you don't have a lot to say. How do you guys feel about the reactions in email?
I only recently received the first email reaction, and it surprised me, but I'm kind of down for it, because one of the pet peeves I do have when it comes to email etiquette is lack of acknowledgement. Like, you send an email to somebody and you have no idea that they've got it, and then they get irritated when you send a follow-up like, hey, just making sure you saw this note. And they're like, of course I did. Like, so the idea that you could just give it like a thumbs up, like, I kind of dig that.
Yeah, I use that all the time, which is why I'm asking your opinion. That reaction was probably from me, because I move so quickly, where if I get an email and I know I don't have time to respond to it right now, but I want the person to know that I've seen it and I'm going to work on it, I'll just send them a quick thumbs up. Or if they're like giving me feedback on something, I'll send, you know, a heart or a celebration or a, you know, whatever emoji matches the acknowledgement that I'm trying to give. And also, I always go back and follow up. For the most part, you know, if I'm going to talk to the person the next day, then I might not. But if it's something where I will not converse with them in some other format, or I will not have any other interactions, I follow up with something after just reacting to it.
Yep. Close the loop. Yep. Very good. Donnie, any last thoughts?
No, I was just marveling at the fact that you actually did a summary for us. So I was like, he must really be passionate about this. He jumped in and did the intro and did the summary. With that, I thank you, Byron, for bringing the topic up and leading us through the conversation.
I appreciate you recognizing that.
You guys are both awesome. Thumbs up.
And I think that's a wrap.
Perfect.
Bye, guys.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.